Thank you very much, Kevin. Distinguished Ramesh Abhishek, Secretary of the Department of Industrial Promotion and Policy, Justice Manmohan Singh, my colleague Naresh Prasad, Assistant Director General at WIPO, and Joint Secretary of DIPP, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great pleasure to be with you here this morning in New Delhi. And let me start by expressing the thanks and appreciation of the World Intellectual Property Organization to the Government of India, and in particular to the Department of Industrial Promotion and Policy and Mr. Abhishek. India has been a faithful and engaged member state of the World Intellectual Property Organization for many decades now, but I would like to acknowledge in particular the extraordinary engagement of the last several years of the Government of India, where we have seen India increase its integration into the international intellectual property system. One of the latest examples was the accession of India to the two, what we call, Internet treaties of 1996, the WIPO Copyright Treaty and the WIPO Performances and Phonograms Treaty, which set many of the early rules in the area of copyright for the Internet. But the engagement of India has extended well beyond the accession to these two treaties, and so we are deeply grateful at WIPO in a time when multilateralism is challenged in all the international organizations. We're deeply grateful to India for its consistent support for multilateralism, and in particular through the World Intellectual Property Organization. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have the task of trying to understand a little about what has happened to the creative industries in the course of the last 20 years, really, in particular, since, I suppose, 1996, 1995, when commercial activity was first permitted on the Internet. And we have seen, of course, and many of you have been intimately concerned with the unfolding of all of these events in the course of the last 20 years, as creators, as producers, as other participants in the digital in the creative industries. Many of you have witnessed at close hand the profound changes in the landscape, which really have introduced a complete transformation in the way in which content, as we now call it, and that's, I'd say, the first big change that we have. We no longer refer so much to music and to literature and to films, but collectively to content. So we have seen that the whole way in which content is created and produced, curated, distributed, and ultimately consumed has been completely transformed and changed. And that impact, which I think has affected every stage of the value chain of content for the creative industries, the impact, I think, has been the most profound at the retail level, at the distribution level, of course, where it is very difficult to find any of the old expressions of retail distribution to which some of us were used in earlier years. So there are no longer, it's very difficult to find bookshops, it's very difficult to find record shops, any physical expression of these works. Instead, they have been transformed and replaced by digital distribution platforms, about which we'll hear much more from our keynote speaker shortly this morning. I think as many of you are very much aware, the complete transformation that has occurred and which is most evident in the case of distribution has not played itself out by any means, and we will certainly see its impact arise more and more at the stages of creation and production of works. For example, the production of artificial intelligence-generated music. And that is going to pose fundamental questions, of course, for intellectual property, where we have been used to individual authors and creators, and where, of course, we face a situation in which the scientific and other communities are really divided between the imperatives of, on the one hand, openness for the sharing of scientific data and other data, and on the other hand, closeness, which is a necessity of competition. And it is going to pose questions like the extent to which the use of a copyrighted work to feed into an algorithm which is generating artificial intelligence generated music is a copyright infringement or not. So there are many questions, I think, that we will see still, and we're at a very early stage. Of course, the two principal drivers of this revolution, from the point of view, looking from the legal point of view, have been the characteristics of digital technology, or at least digital technology with its characteristic of reproducibility, which has introduced this extraordinary disjunction between the cost of production and the cost of reproduction. So for those of you who are involved in the audiovisual industry, you're very much aware of the millions and tens of millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars that represent the cost of production of a film, all of which can be reproduced at zero marginal cost in a matter of seconds. So that has been one major challenge. The other major challenge, of course, has been the internet with its ubiquity and the inability to contain anything anymore. And that has also been an extraordinary challenge on for copyrighted works. Now, the early approaches in the course of the last 20 years to these two new characteristics that confronted creative works of being easily reproducible, very easily reproducible, and available everywhere, potentially available everywhere once put on the internet, have led to a number, as we are all aware, a number of experimental approaches, both on the part of business and on the part of policymakers, as to how to deal with these new characteristics in the digital environment. And many of those early approaches were really based on an analogy with the analog world or the physical world. So Apple, for example, first began to sell songs as if they were individual commodities. If you all recall, at the commencement of the distribution of music, and it's a very long distance from where we are, of course, now, with platforms that stream music or ask for subscriptions. So we've seen great evolution in the sort of business models that are applied to come to terms with the new characteristics of the technology that surrounds creative works these days. Now, in all of that process of 20 years, or a little more than 20 years of radical, very radical disruption for all of the creative industries, I think there remain some very fundamental questions that we have not yet resolved, and we're far from resolving in any way. I think the most fundamental of them all, of course, is how to sustain a creative society, how to sustain the creative industries in society. This is the production question, if you like, from an economic point of view. In this regard, of course, at the heart of production of creative content is the creator or the performer of the creation, the creators and the performers. And so we still, I think, have an outstanding question as to how well creators and performers have fared in this new digital environment and in the new business models that are developed for this new digital environment. After production, of course, there is the fundamental problem of distribution, and that is, how do the new business models distribute value across the chain for creative industries? And here, as you're all aware, there are some fundamental differences of opinion in the world. There are those in the world who believe that there is an unhealthy concentration of value in the distribution function of creative works. Those who believe that there is a value gap, as it is called, and this is particularly a view prevalent in Europe, and the value gap is the gap between the amount of wealth generated by a digital platform in distributing, for example, music, creative content, on the one hand, and the amount, the portion of that value which is returned to the music industry itself. So this is one view of the matter which is very much discussed in Europe, the value gap. But there are other views of the distribution function, for example, that we have not yet developed sufficiently the machinery, the market machinery, to support the creative industries in the new environment, and that there are still many inefficiencies in the current environment which result from really a legacy of the analog markets. And here, this applies in particular, I'd say, to the fact that the architecture of the analog market was territorial and physical, whereas the architecture of the digital market is global and virtual. There is additionally, I would say, a major question of governance, which is arising, and it's affecting really all elements of the digital economy, but it's affecting in particular the creative industries. And it's a situation in which we see that the models for governance of the market are very much changing. Laws continue, of course, to be extremely important, but other mechanisms such as standards and identifiers and all of the elements, the components that go into creating an interoperable digital market become more important elements in determining the governance framework under which the creative industries, in this instance, are operating. And here I think our question to you all in the course of the discussion would be what can be done to establish a more efficient market globally. And we all know, I think, that the market for illegal content globally is an extremely efficient market. The market for legal content globally is less efficient. And I think our task is to try to make the legal market more efficient and at least as efficient as the illegal market. So there are, I think, very many fundamental questions which we hope will be teased out in the course of the next 2 days and which really remain unresolved, even though I think we can all rejoice in the fact that extremely good progress has been made in general with the creative industries in the digital environment, and we are seeing digital sales rising generally. But we're a long way from a position of being complacent, I think. And all of this, of course, has been taking place or unfolding against another, the background of another fundamental change, which has been the change in value, essentially, the geopolitical change in value, and the change shift in particular towards Asia. So we are holding this conference in the 6th largest economy in the world now. Asia, on all indicators, whether demographic, economic production, or indeed technological production, is now the dominant source in the world, in the field of intellectual property. Over 60% of all patent applications, all trademark applications, and all design applications originate in Asia. The measures for the creative industries are different, but we know that the very vibrant creative industries of Asia really are constituting a bigger and bigger force all the time. And with rising living standards across the whole of the Asian area, we will see that the creative industries become much more and more important, and content for the Asian market and the exportation of the soft power of Asian content will become major factors in the future. So I wish you all a very successful conference and a very good discussion. We will be listening attentively to how you perceive all of the developments that have been occurring, and where you perceive that some support for the efficient operation of the digital market on a global basis might be provided for by the World Intellectual Property Organization. Again, my thanks to the Government of India, and thanks to all of our speakers and moderators and all of you for participating in this conference. Thank you.